Good afternoon to you all. We cross straight to Parliament now. The State of the Nation address due to take place at 7 o'clock this evening. Our Politics Editor Sbu Ngalwa outside Parliament. He is speaking now to Laura Brooks. Sbu, good afternoon to you. What's the situation there this afternoon?
Good afternoon, Stephen. Yes, we are merely a few hours away from the State of the Nation address, and as you would know, Stephen, that in as much as there's a lot that happens beyond the corridors of the National Assembly, there's always a lot of interest from stakeholders in terms of what happens in there. And we do know that this year Parliament has got its work cut out in that there are 36 bills that are before the National Assembly, and one of those, Stephen, is the Children's Act, which also has impact on the early childhood development sector. And Stephen, I can tell you now that there have been a lot of confusion from that sector, particularly over the last year when we had to deal with COVID-19, and there are a lot of expectations around there. As you would recall, that there was that big announcement in 2019 by the President during his State of the Nation address, where he announced that the early childhood development would migrate from the Department of Social Development to the Department of Basic Education, but it looks like there has been a lot of confusion in that regard. But now that is one of the issues, Stephen, that the ECD sector is looking to hear today, and that is why, Stephen, I'll introduce to you my next guest, which is Laura Brooks. Now, Laura is with the Ilifa Labantwana, which is an organization which deals with issues of early childhood development. Now, Laura, I understand that the President made the announcement in 2019, and then in 2020 there seems to have been a lot of confusion as to which part or who does what between the two departments. Where are we now?
Thanks for having me on. Yes, in 2019 the President announced the intention to move the function for early childhood development, so specifically responsibility for ECD centres, from social development to basic education. He also announced the intention to introduce an additional year of compulsory preschool education. Since then, in 2020, we were hoping for a presidential proclamation which would have provided clarity on what form that shift in responsibility would take, so which functions would move from social development to basic education and how, and exactly what is meant by the intention to introduce an additional year of compulsory preschool.
Now, with the President addressing the nation tonight, what exactly would you like to hear?
We definitely need clarity on this issue. When is this function going to move, and who is going to be responsible for which parts of the full suite of ECD services? So remembering that early childhood development services go beyond just early learning centres, which was really what was referenced in 2019 State of the Nation address. But also, I think what COVID has really brought into the spotlight is that early childhood development services go well beyond what government understands just the ECD centre, and include all sorts of non-centre based early learning programs like playgroups, and is provided by a large number of service providers that really need to be supported and brought into the net at the current moment. And that's why we're really looking forward to the opportunity to engage with the Children's Amendment Bill. We feel at Ilifa that the Children's Amendment Bill is a missed opportunity to address the way that ECD services, that early learning programs are regulated.
I think let's start with what exactly does the bill say in relation to ECD that which you find to be inadequate?
There's really very little suggestion of change, particularly in terms of the norms and standards that regulate how early learning programs are, what they're required to do in order to register, what standards they have to meet in terms of infrastructure and staffing, qualifications, etc., in order to be registered. Those standards are really aspirational at the moment, and in effect exclude the large majority of service providers who are providing critical services to children. And so what we end up with is a space where most providers are operating outside the regulatory net and are therefore not monitored or supported by government. So this is really a missed opportunity to bring the norms and standards in line with reality to ensure that more providers are regulated and funded by the government.
Now, Laura, we understand that the children's bill has already been has been tabled in Parliament, which means that it is now on its way through the parliamentary program. What would you like to see happen with that particular bill? Would you like to see it scrapped completely, or just some changes made insofar as ECD is concerned?
So next month we have oral hearings on the Children's Amendment Bill, and we're hoping that the sector is going to come out in full force to describe their stories about how they've engaged with the norms and standards currently, and to say that the proposed changes are inadequate. We then hope that the particular chapters on early childhood development are retracted, and that there are clear revisions to those that bring real reform for the ECD sector.
Now, Laura, the President will be speaking tonight, and he made mention of ECD and the importance of ECD, and we had also the Minister of Basic Education telling us that as of last year, they will make it compulsory, the 2 years before grade 1. Has this happened? If not, why has it not happened, as you understand?
I think the COVID crisis has really stalled a lot of action that was planned in putting in place the mechanisms required to carry out the function shift. And so I think basic education has had to really focus on that crisis, as has DSD, social development. We'd really like to see a proclamation on how and when that function shift will take place. If it's not in tonight's SONA, then hopefully in the debates that follow, there's an insistence that we need clarity on that delegation of authority, or on who's mandated to be responsible for early childhood development.
Do you somewhat feel, would it be correct to say, do you somewhat feel that with all these announcements having been made, and then with the outbreak of COVID-19, that perhaps the issues of ECD have been shoved to the side?
Yes and no. I think a really exciting thing we've seen that's come out of the COVID crisis is that the sector, ECD providers and NGOs focusing on ECD, have really raised their voice in order to lift up the story of ECD providers at the moment, and the importance of ECD services. It's also forced government to realize how many providers there are and how much support they need. And so in response, as part of the presidential stimulus package for employment stimulus package, ECD has been included as a recipient of some of those funds. And that creates an important precedent for us, particularly in that those funds can be channeled to programs that have not previously been funded by government, so unregistered ECD programs. So that really gives us an opportunity to say government has recognized that there's a need to support more than the current cohort of programs that is registered and supported by government. And that's a really exciting moment for us. So I think that does bring ECD back into the spotlight. I don't think it's been ignored. I think we just really need clarity on some key issues to take us forward into a new trajectory for the ECD sector.
Right. Thank you very much. That was Laura Brooks, who is a senior manager at Ilifa Labantwana. Now, Stephen, you can hear the level of expectation and the anticipation of tonight's State of the Nation, in that while there are big ticket items like the economic recovery, while there are millions of unemployed people who are looking to hear what exactly the President will be saying about the 350 Rand unemployment relief grant, because as you would recall that the ANC at its last NEC Lekgotla took a decision to say that should continue. But we heard from the President tell us that they do not have the money. But though there is still anticipation, Stephen, that those are some of the items that we'll have to touch on. What about infrastructure development? Now, as you heard from Laura here, that also the early childhood development sector also is interested to hear what exactly the President will say about this sector, having made that big announcement in 2019, Stephen. So that's exactly the mood here in Cape Town. While there may not be much happening beyond the walls of Parliament, there are South Africans and interested parties and stakeholders who are interested in tonight's address. Stephen.
Sbu Ngalwa, thanks very much indeed. Part of our team at Parliament today for the State of the Nation address. Now,